This inaugural season of God of High School is finally starting to heat up. After last week, I was getting a little concerned about anime changes and potential cut content, but this week took a turn for the better. The episode was fast-paced, which all viewers should be accustomed to by now, but this week the quick pace enhanced the episode rather than worsening it. We kept all the nuance, character development, and world building from the webtoon without a single moment of boredom. While this episode was fantastic, there was still one chapter that was in the webtoon which was omitted from the anime. Although I'm hopeful it will be covered in a future episode, I'll be going over everything the anime skips to give you guys a fuller understanding of the story. God of High School Episode 4, Marriage/Bonds, covering chapters 24 through 29. Unlike previous weeks, there weren't any major restructures or omitted content, but chapter 24 was completely skipped in this episode, so I'm gonna cover it here under the assumption that it won't be covered later in the anime. So chapter 24 opens up with Bongchim and Mubong discussing the God of High School tournament. They allude to the true meaning of God of High School as Bongchim asks if the tournament is meant for what he thinks it is. After discussing the purpose of God of High School, they also discuss that the villainous organization that we've been seeing in the anime is on the move and up to something. But to counter this, they also reference that the Six is starting to group up and is starting to make a move. They also reference Taijin, which beautifully goes into the next scene where we cut to Jin Taijin. He's just chilling at his home in the mountains. He's kind of a country bumpkinish kind of person. He's just cooking a pig outside and he's suddenly ambushed by a man in a cloak. The man in the cloak asks Taijin to join, but Taijin easily defeats him. But one thing to note is even though Taijin won the fight, it's really starting to show that he's not invincible as his hand had a giant scratch after the cloaked member self-destructed. From here on out, the anime follows the webtoon pretty closely. The wedding mini-arc was a really good adaptation, so instead of things left out, the rest of the episode just enhanced or reworked things from the original story. Most things in the webtoon were covered in the anime, but they're a little shuffled, so I'll go scene by scene in order of the anime, discussing the differences between it and the webtoon. So now going on to chapter 25. Episode 4 opened up with a kind of anime-only-ish scene. It adapted one small panel from chapter 25, which discussed everything that's happened in the tournament up until now, while in the anime it was a longer, like 30-ish second scene where the nurses recap the tournament so far and start hyping up the semis of the prelims. I also liked how in the anime they take more inspiration from the webtoon, and the recap is drawn in a sort of comic book style very similarly to how the webtoon was illustrated. Continuing with chapter 25, the next scene in the anime shows the trio walking home. Songjin spots Mira and approaches the group proposing to her, then the scene fades to the opening. The same basic purpose was achieved in the webtoon, but it was handled very differently. The webtoon has the running gag of the purse thief, which we saw in episode 1, and the thief steals the old lady's purse yet again, and Miri gets on Mori's bike and they start to charge towards him. Then we see Songjin taking the sword from Mira and knocking out the thief. Here it's shown that he's an influential business person and he proposes to Mira on the spot. So these two scenes had pretty much the same purpose of Songjin proposing to Mira, but they were just handled a lot differently in each. I don't really have a preference here to which one I liked better or thought was more impactful. I just think it's a rework that the author decided to do to make his story better in his eyes. The next scene in the show shows Mira and her sister Sumi talking about the wedding. Then we see a flashback of Songjin telling Mira that he can help rejuvenate her sword style. He can't believe how obscure it is for such a strong sword style. The webtoon takes a much different approach and it's all about money here. Instead of the conversation between Mira and her sister just talking about the wedding, they're talking about Sumi having to wear her old uniform, which she doesn't like and she doesn't think is fashionable. We see this dynamic with money being a real issue in the Yu family, as Mira also sees that she needs money for bills and that her uncle's business is starting to struggle. Just like the rest of the episode, this change is more of preference, but personally I like it more in the anime because in the webtoon it just seems like Songjin's essentially buying Mira's hand in marriage, while in the anime it's more like Songjin is going to work with Mira as partners to help establish her sword style, which makes it seem more believable that Songjin might not have the worst intentions for Mira initially, whereas in the webtoon it's pretty obvious that he has malintent from the very beginning. The next scene in the anime shows a flashback of Mira attending her dad's funeral. This is a pretty much one-to-one adaptation of the webtoon. All of the points are covered. We see Mira crying as any child would be at their parents' funeral, and Mira's uncle being the only relative to take her in and help cheer her up. Now the next scene in the anime is the conversation between Songjin and Mira's uncle. These conversations are yet again very different in both the anime and the webtoon. So in the anime, Songjin says he will help establish Mira's sword style, which is something that neither he or his brother couldn't do, and this paints Songjin in a bad light early on, alluding to what he'll do later in the episode, since it shows that Songjin is already taking jabs at Mira's family and he doesn't really respect her that much. In the webtoon, Songjin still keeps face with the uncle, trying to act like a nice guy, and just like earlier, it's all about money and not revitalizing her sword style. In the webtoon, Songjin offers to pay for the uncle's expenses and help his dying business. Just like before, the changes don't make that big of a deal, but I do like how it was portrayed in the anime more than the webtoon in the case of this scene. In the next scene, Mori rushes over to talk to Mira after hearing that she's getting married, and the only real difference here is that Daiwi is present in the webtoon, but at the end of the day, it's really not a big deal because even in the webtoon when Daiwi's there, he doesn't really talk or say much of anything to Mira, so it's almost like he isn't there, which he really isn't in the anime, so it's not really that big of a deal. All the same major points are kept, except there's one small detail in the webtoon that's left out of the anime. In the webtoon, Mira questions trusting the god of high school tournament, actually granting wishes and helping them at the very end, which starts to have Daiwi question whether he can actually save his sick friend. Although this seems like a relatively small detail, it actually played a major part in characterizing more of the reason why Daiwi did what he did later in the episode. Then we get some more restructures of the webtoon. The anime skips the rest of chapter 25 for now and goes on to chapter 26. We get Daiwi's conversation with Mori about going to stop the wedding and save Mira from marriage. The scene is pretty much the same in the anime as the webtoon, but there's also another detail left out in the anime. In the webtoon, Daiwi and Mori meet in person instead of talking over the phone, and we're also revealed more of Daiwi's character, as he says that he doesn't want to get close with Mori and Mira, and especially Mori because Mori reminds him of his sick friend, and he can't bear to get close to someone else just to lose them like he's potentially losing his friend. And in my opinion, I think this scene was really important. I'm not sure why they cut it out from the anime, other to try to make it less obvious and maybe hint towards that as being a reason why Daiwi doesn't want to get close to them. I think they could potentially be saving this scene for Daiwi's fight with Mori, but other than that, I'm not really happy about this change. Now the anime goes back to chapter 25 with the second interaction between Mira's uncle and Songjin. In both adaptations, Mira's uncle is a flashback of Mira's life, realizing that it's a mistake for her to marry Songjin, and pleads to him to cancel the wedding. At this point, it's a matter of execution, as they both serve the same purpose. In the anime, as the uncle pleads, Mira cuts off the conversation, saying that she's doing it for her sword style. This sends Sumi running off crying because she's sad that Mira is not marrying someone that she truly loves. In the webtoon, Songjin flat out denies the uncle, saying he wouldn't cancel it since he already dealt with the papers. Sumi overhears this and runs to Mira, leading her to get kicked out of the reception and be hunted by the guards. At the end of the day, both the webtoon and the anime have the same purpose here, as it ends with Sumi running away crying, sad at the relationship between Mira and Songjin. But I will say that it makes more sense in the webtoon how Sumi ends up meeting Mori. Since she's being hunted by the guards, it makes more sense that she needs someone to save her. And with this, that's the end of chapter 25, and now on to chapter 26. The scene with Mori and Sumi is the same in both the anime and the webtoon. Mori meets Sumi and consoles her about Mira, and Sumi tells Mori about Songjin's true intentions, inspiring Mori to get things done. When we get the flashback of Songjin with the villainous organization telling him that he needs to retrieve Mira's sword. This scene is also the same in both the webtoon and anime, not really any differences in this. And now we go on to the scene with Mori and the bodyguards, which I have to say is actually much better in the webtoon. In the anime, Mori simply tries to jump through the guards and ends up getting knocked down and stopped, but in the webtoon it's a lot more epic in nature. Mori looks a lot cooler in the process, and he's able to hold them off just by standing there and puffing his chest out, even while there's like 5 or 6 of them all pushing against him and striking him. Then Daiwi shows up, knocking down the guards, which is the same in the webtoon and the anime. I will say that this scene with the bodyguards actually makes a lot more sense in the webtoon. Even though it's a minor detail, it really doesn't make much sense from a power scaling way on how a regular bodyguard is able able to push Mori back or even injure him in the slightest. But that isn't really a big deal, and it's a trend from both the webtoon and the anime that they both achieve the same purpose and not really anything is left out from it, although I will say in this case I think the scene in the webtoon was a lot cooler with the bodyguards. And that covers the end of chapter 26. The iconic cover of this chapter from the webtoon is beautifully adapted in the anime. I really like the scene of how Mori and Daiwi are walking into the reception hall in their poses just like they were in the webtoon. I'm getting a lot of One Piece vibes with their walk, reminding me of all the Straw Hats epic walks. And what makes this even cooler is in the webtoon, there's actually a little piece of artwork that shows Daiwi as Zoro and Mori as Luffy. I just thought that was a cool thing that was in the webtoon. Obviously that can't really be in the anime, but I just thought it was a cool little design that the author put in the webtoon. The next scene in the anime showed Songjin slashing Daiwi. In the webtoon, I also think that this was a bit cooler as Daiwi tanks a large slash across the chest, while in the anime he simply just blocks his sword slash with his hand. In the webtoon, I think that Daiwi is trying to make the point that he views Songjin as someone so weak that he doesn't even have to defend himself against. And while Daiwi is distracting Songjin, Mori goes to talk to Mira. This is also a one-to-one adaptation between the webtoon and the anime. Mori talks to Mira trying to convince her, and then one final flashback and words from her uncle end up tipping the tides, making Mira decide to cancel the wedding. And this is the end of chapter 27. And chapter 28 is also pretty much the exact same in the webtoon and the anime. Mira confronts Songjin and they have a little scuffle, but Mira ends up easily winning in the end. Songjin also escapes with Mira's sword. One thing that I want to point out in the webtoon that was also in the anime was this really great scene of the trio walking away with Mira in her wedding dress with Daiwi and Mori at her side. Now on to chapter 29. The infamous fight between Mira and Daiwi. I think the anime adaptation is both better and worse at the same time. The actual fight was much better in the anime, but some of the things surrounding it were better in the webtoon, because the anime skips some stuff. The anime shows Daiwi with his sick friend, but it skips one important thing. In the webtoon, Daiwi has a lot more reason to brutalize Mira in the way he does, because Mubang tells Daiwi that he'll need an overwhelming win against Mira to ensure that his friend can get properly taken care of before the end of the tournament. And given this additional context in the webtoon, it just makes a lot more sense as to why Daiwi decided to beat Mira in the way he did. I'm pretty hopeful that we'll get the same with Mubang telling Daiwi he needs an overwhelming win probably in the next episode or maybe in a flashback during the fight with Daiwi and Mori. Besides this initial setup, the fight was much better in the anime. Both adaptations show Mori running to the fight just to see Mira getting obliterated. In the anime, the fight looks a lot more real as it shows Daiwi's bloody hands and blood flying out of Mira's body with every strike, ultimately leaving her in a pool of her own blood. Even though it was much better in the anime, the webtoon actually does add one additional detail where Daiwi completely tries to cut bonds, saying he didn't consider either Mori or Mira his friend. These few words in the webtoon were really insightful into Daiwi's character because I think him pushing away Mira and Mori is a combination of him faking it and realistically wanting to distance himself from them so he can't get close to them and potentially lose them. But both show Daiwi walking past Mori and ominously saying, "See you in the finals." And this is the end of the episode and the end of chapter 29. Overall, I think this was a really good episode. It's not like previous weeks, nothing was really skipped or left out. Most of the difference were minuscule restructures that the author himself approved to make the story flow better in his eyes. Thanks for watching. If you guys have anything you want me to cover, please leave it in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe.